Today I want to sit down and talk quite a bit about The Division, and more specifically, The Division 2. This conversation sort of falls in line with what we did yesterday in regard to Anthem, that idea that sometimes all you need is one gameplay component, one mechanic, one singular piece of your experience that could create new gameplay potential throughout the rest of the experience for your players. Something that can have that ripple effect to make old things feel new again. In the case of Anthem, we focused on its flying mechanics and how that is undoubtedly going to create a more unique experience across experiences we've had in other games before. So, when we look at The Division and its transition to The Division 2 early next year, what stands out is that one mechanic, that one element that can have that ripple effect on the rest of the experience. Now, we could look at gameplay, and there are a lot of substantial gameplay changes coming to The Division 2. A lot of things happening with minor attributes and major attributes, some of them even going away entirely, and that's probably a discussion I'd like to have at a later date, maybe even after we play the beta. But when I think of the one thing that can sort of exist in the backdrop and influence all of those new changes and all of the things that might be coming directly over from the original game, I think about the game's environmental design. I think about the open world itself, and in this case with The Division 2, I think about our transition from the frozen urban wasteland of New York City to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. in the summer, nonetheless, a world being reclaimed by Mother Nature herself. I'm very excited to go to Washington, D.C. in The Division 2 for many reasons. I think first and foremost, we just have to look at Massive's track record when it comes to building open world environments. Well, they only have one open world environment, but it's a real humdinger. The Division 1's New York City, its frozen urban wasteland, is without a doubt one of the most beautifully detailed and rich pieces of environmental design in video games ever. It is a location that I will talk about for many, many years to come because it's just that damn impressive. And I know a lot of people like to look back at the E3 demo and be like, it never looked as good as that, but really, the thing about the E3 demo was just raw pixel power. It looked like it had higher resolution, it was a bit shinier in some areas. But to say that we never got any of that goodness inside of the Division 1 would be a complete lie. We still got all of that beautiful detail, we still got all of that atmosphere, the lighting effects, the fog, the weather effects. Stomping through the frozen streets of New York City in The Division 1 is quite an intoxicating experience. In fact, it's my favorite thing about The Division 1. It's the reason I kept playing the game even when we ran out of gameplay content and a lot of the weapon balancing and, statistical balancing was not in the best possible place. I kept playing because I just liked spending time in the world of The Division. I liked spending time in the Dark Zone. As miserable and as difficult as it could be to survive in there and actually gather loot, the Dark Zone represented a beautiful piece of world design, a dark, a desolate, and a desperate piece of world design. And that's honestly my favorite thing about the overall theme of The Division 1's New York City, is that it's just loaded with moods. Deep, dark, horrible moods. It's not a place that makes you feel happy or good or safe, but it drives home all of those miserable feelings, all of those miserable moods so well that it really does capture that idea of a once thriving city now abandoned, now essentially left for dead. That's not an easy thing to do in video game design. And while The Division 1 didn't really have the quest structure, the mission structure to back up that big and beautiful world, I think in this case, that beautiful world, that rich, that detailed world, oozing with clutter and debris, much of it existing to remind you that this place was once alive and breathing, really strengthened the rest of the areas in which The Division 1 struggled. I'll never forget those moments when I was just in the Dark Zone alone and a blizzard came rolling in, and you get that whiteout, the snowstorm, the lights shining through the snow. You see the quarantine zones, the piles of bodies and bags of waste, and just kind of makes you feel good in a really horrible, awful way. So while The Division 1 was all about that cold, desolate urban wasteland, The Division 2 has an opportunity to focus on reclamation. The idea of not just humanity sort of coming out from the darkness 7 months after the green poison, but also Mother Nature, now free of its frozen grasps in Washington, D.C., able to grow back on out into what humanity had constructed and had essentially left behind at this point. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about it from an atmospheric perspective. I'm excited about it from a mood perspective, being able to see a lot more wildlife would be something I'd really like. It was cool to have the rats and the dogs. That's very NYC. But in this case, in the summertime, seeing the deer we get to see in the E3 demo, I want more of that, right? Well, New York City felt like it was someone hanging on by their last leg, right? Just a lifeline, just ready to run out. I want Washington, D.C. to feel like that rebirth, like that reclamation, right? Like everything's kind of coming back, but we're still all just trying to survive. And we get hints of that in the E3 demo, so I'm pretty stoked on that. I also think it's going to be a really nice fresh start, in terms of environments. For the longest time, I'm going to be honest, when I thought about how they could grow the Division, number one, I didn't think they'd do a sequel. I felt like they would just do a big expansion of sorts and kind of expand the experience. And I thought we'd stay in New York City. I thought, okay, we'll move out of winter, we'll go to summertime, different part of the city, maybe explore more of Brooklyn, maybe expand in that regard. That would have been okay, but this is obviously the better direction to really take us someplace new, because outside of the atmospherics and giving us a new place to explore, a new place to see, new opportunities to showcase the Snowdrop engine and its beautiful tech and the designers behind that beautiful tech, it also gives us a lot of new gameplay opportunities. And this is the second way in which this new environment can really influence our experience in the Division 2. We now have a much more open space, a much more diverse space. New York City is focused heavily on tight, claustrophobic corridors, whether you're in the city itself, in the subway stations, in the dark zone, in the sewers. It's all very confined, right? And that really lends itself to a lot of the gameplay experiences like the Underground DLC that we got in the Division 1. A lot of it giving players the opportunity to back themselves into a corner and really defend themselves from like a 180-degree view. But now in Washington, D.C., with all these open, large, expansive, flatland type areas and the combination of some urban and some suburban environments, we've got more variety. And a lot of that variety is going to include opportunities for big 360-degree flanks. Not just for us to flank the enemy, but for the enemy to flank us. It also creates many more environments where we're going to have to close the gap on our enemy. We're going to have to push in, get in the right range to actually deal with the damage drop off of certain weapons. We can't all just be snipers out on the edge of the map, right? And we're going to have to compensate for that. It also, in turn, has the potential to make snipers a little bit more deadly than they were in the first game, giving them more opportunities to engage us from a distance. I'm curious to see how they handle enemy encounters, and I hope while we only really get to see this control point at the E3 demo, that there's more opportunities for long-range encounters, for enemies to sort of take pot shots at us and to put us in a position where we were feeling safe out in the open away from an enemy camp, but now all of a sudden we're pulled into that engagement by that sniper. I'd like to see things like that happen with this more open environment. It also has a huge opportunity to, of course, influence PvP in the Dark Zone. We don't know much about the Dark Zone right now, but I'm curious to see just where the Dark Zone is going to take place, if they keep it in a more confined urban type environment within DC, or if they give us that same variety we're getting in the full open world. I think that would be awesome, and I'd love to see that transition from more urban areas to more flat open areas within the Dark Zone itself, just creating more opportunities for danger zones. We got some of those in the Dark Zone in the Division 1. A lot of the areas where you would go to extract were kind of open, 360 degrees, but this is an opportunity for the devs to really open that potential up, and that's something I'm also really stoked on. Washington, D.C. is a place I'm really excited to visit through the lens of the world of the Division. I think there's just going to be a lot of great atmosphere here that we haven't seen in the franchise before. And in general, when we talk about, more urban, more populated type areas that have been overran in the middle of summer by Mother Nature, that's not something we've actually got to experience that much of, at least not in this setting in open world games. So this is a chance again for Snowdrop to really flex its muscles, for the devs to flex their skill in flexing the muscles of Snowdrop, and to really give us a place that just feels intoxicating. It's honestly what I'm most excited for. I have my concerns, I have my excitement for the game and its gameplay mechanics, but if they can drive home a really powerful piece of world design again with Washington, D.C., then they're going to get me hooked. pretty much right from the get-go. And after that, it's just, how are you going to keep me on board, And even if something happens where I don't personally want to play the game for thousands of hours, being able to spend even 20 or 30 hours in a really great piece of open world design like New York City in the Division 1, it would be more than enough to make that purchase of the Division 2 worth every single penny for me. The question I have for you fine folks out there is, what did you think of the Division 1's take on New York City? Why did you like it? What sort of implications did it have for you on your experience? And we don't necessarily need to dive into like questing and, the mission structure. I agree that a lot of that wasn't anywhere near as good as the open world itself, but how did that open world influence the rest of your experience? And are you looking forward to Washington, D.C.? If so, why? Let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.